Jetzt machen wir einen weiteren Schritt und ich bin sehr froh, dass André Leu, ich hoffe, ich sage das richtig, uns die große Ehre gemacht hat, von Australien zu uns zu kommen. I think I have to speak in English, so you can understand. He will give the opening lecture, and André Leu is a former president of IFOAM. IFOAM is the big organization for organic farming in the world. So we met him in Delhi as a president. Now he does a lot of other things. But he told me what is important for him. He's a farmer, most important. And he was more than 15 years a biodynamic farmer. He didn't tell a lot about this, but now he will tell a lot about this. And we are very happy to have you, André. Please. And you have water.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jean-Michel, and also to André and the other organizers for giving me the incredible honor of speaking on this stage. I feel like I'm in a temple rather than an auditorium. And as a farmer, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how I got started, this means so much to me. And the other thing I'd just like to say that is so important is the title, Finding the Spirit in Agriculture. Because at the moment, with industrial agriculture, that is lost and it is damaging our planet. And to bring back an agriculture with spirit is just so important for the future of the planet and for us as a species. So what I'd like to start is a little bit about my story and how I became a farmer and why I became a farmer. These pictures are from my farm, and they're recent because when I started this story in 1971, I didn't have a cell phone that could take digital pictures. So I have no pictures of this story, but hopefully these pictures will help tell this story. That at 17 years old, I was unhappy at school and unhappy at home, and I hitchhiked over 3,000 kilometres from where I lived into the wet tropics of far north Queensland. And this is an area like Costa Rica or Mozambique. It's tropical rainforests with coral reefs. And one day I was walking through the forest just down a little dirt road and came out of the canopy and into the light, and I came across one of the first biodynamic farms in Australia, one of the pioneering ones. And this farm was just alive with tropical flowers and tropical plants, tropical fruits that I'd never seen, tropical vegetables. I'd never seen anything like it, and it was as though I had walked into the Garden of Eden. And it was at that point I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And so I started at that point. And for all of us who are farmers here, I just want to say, it's never easy. We had our failures and our trials. But my wife and I, we actually became very successful. And I think one of the greatest things we did is we raised our family on a farm. And I think that is, to me, one of my greatest, or our greatest achievements. Our current farm, we had a neighbour, and his name was Geb von Keyserling. He grew organic, biodynamic coffee. And Geb and I became very good friends because we were about the only biodynamic farmers in the district. And one day I said to Geb, Geb, you're Count von Keyserling, aren't you? And he goes, yes. He says, in Australia I wanted to keep it a secret, but because we were friends, he started to tell me the story of what happened to his family. And for everybody here, you know the story that the agriculture lecturers happened on the von Keyserling farm in those days Prussia, now Silesia. And after the Second World War, when the Russians took over, they appropriated the land and the von Keyserlings became refugees. And Geb decided that he wanted to go as far away from Europe as possible to forget about the war and forget about all the troubles. So he went to the other side of the world, Australia. And when he got to Australia, he decided he didn't want to be near the cities. He then travelled thousands of kilometres further into the wilderness of Australia to forget about Europe and start his new life. So Geb and I became very good friends, and he used to tell me the stories about his grandparents' farms. Anyway, I haven't got, today's not the time for me to tell all these stories. The next part of the story is that Geb unfortunately died in the early 1990s. And many years later, his daughter, Countess von Keyserling, says to me that she wants to sell her title as Countess because in Australia it's meaningless, but she could use that money for their farm. And I knew that she had not been told her family history. And so I gave her my copy of Agriculture and I said, read this book because this happened on your great-grandparents' farm. And this is the beginning of the organised biodynamic and organic movements on the planet. This is your family's heritage and history. Your title is part of that. Don't give this history away. Don't sell it. And the good news is she is still Countess von Keyserling, but I have to still buy a copy of Agriculture. I haven't got one. Anyway, to talk about this book, because it's an important book, but one of the things that surprises me is the number of organic and biodynamic farmers who haven't read it. They're just happy to put the preps out. And many times I've asked people, why don't you read it? And they go, oh, it's so difficult. I can't get my head around it. And what I'd like to explain to people, this is not a story. You don't read it from end to end. It's a book you take parts of and meditate on. That, you don't have to read everything and understand everything. The important thing is pulling the parts out that are meaningful for you, meditate and build on them. And so I just want to give 3 of them here that have been very important to me in my life when I first read this book in 1971. The first one is that everything is connected. I don't know if it's not working, but just to say everything is connected by a complex web of energy and using conscious intent. And I want to talk more about that. The other one that is really important, every farm is an individuality. That is equally important. You know, we need to do our farms in our way. And the third one, and the one I hope that people also take away, that Steiner said, these lectures are just the beginning. They're a basis for us to take this knowledge and expand and regenerate, renew farming The title is The Spiritual Renewal, and we really need it. To set the scene here, of course, the title, what I put up there, Biodynamic Agriculture, is based on Anthroposophy, is obvious to everyone here. I find it interesting that a lot of people don't know that, and we need to say it. But what I wanted to get across is the difference between Steiner's, what I'll call a spiritual science, which is based very much on energy and consciousness and spirituality, as against Cartesian reductionism, which is the basis of modern science, which is about always reducing things, using simplistic mathematical equations where the spiritual and consciousness has got nothing to do with it. It's fully material. An example for that, for me, are the preparations. The preparations that we use in biodynamics are about focusing and at putting the cosmic forces into our farming systems. It's about cosmic energy. And for me, stirring is very much about it. I've got a beautiful modern automatic stirrer that I was talked into getting. In the end, I've never used it because actually I believe that stirring 500 is a meditation. And I actually believe that getting the energy in there is also conscious intent of your mind is equally important to bring these forces in. To the point, I love stirring. Actually, I still stir my coffee this way. I make a vortex. It just fascinates me. Then I turn it around the other way and see the chaos and do it again. You know, from the moment I learnt that, it's just even now, almost 50 years later, it just fascinates me. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. But what I'd really like to show here is that what I found is really interesting now is that the Cartesian reductionism is actually showing that Steiner is right and how perceptive he was. That's why I titled this Steiner, 100 years ahead of the science of his time. And some of the things I'm showing you have only really been learnt by science because of new technology in the last decade. Consciousness and the fact that we can use our minds from a distance to affect matter and energy is well and truly proven in reductionist science. This is an example of one scientific publication. It's 30 years old. It looks at hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that demonstrates that if we focus our minds, we can affect the outcome of matter and energy at a distance. And it doesn't matter what that distance is. It could be across continents. It's intent. What is really interesting in these studies is that if you meditated, if you're someone with more control over your conscious mind, you had better outcomes, and these outcomes were measurable. Since that paper, there are hundreds of more papers showing this. So anybody who thinks that using our conscious minds to affect things is mumbo-jumbo, sorry, but they need to look at the science now. This is why I'm saying Steiner was well ahead of his time. Science is just starting to catch up. Let's talk about using our mind and consciousness, because this is a really critical issue. And I want to show you where modern science is starting to get a grasp on consciousness, but I want to take it further than them. But now what they're saying is that consciousness comes from neural networks. These are all the nerves and the way they join together and they build these networks. And this is what is consciousness. And so they're using it now for artificial intelligence and computers. It doesn't just have to be nerves. It's connections of energy. That energy can be electricity. That energy can be light. But I actually want to take it a step further. But now I'm actually going to take it back to the 1930s. Kirlian photography. And this is very scientific, but dismissed by reductionist science, because the thing is about reductionist science, you reduce things to the lowest level, and if there's something that doesn't fit in, it's an inconvenience to your science, you forget about it. This is forgotten about. But now, with what we're starting to understand about neural networks, this fits in very well. What we find now is that there's these networks of energy in all living entities. So if you look at the leaves of the plants, I love the picture of the palm. See the circle. See the energy there. See the fingertips and the energy that radiates out, and how our hands can actually send out energy. Why we hug, why we touch, why we heal with hands. And then the other one I think is really important is look at the top at the human body, and you can see the energy is not just the brain or inside the body. The energy is also outside of the body. It's an aura. These are, this is science that can be documented and repeated time after time. So if you want to talk about these neural networks, it's not just the brain, it's our whole body. There's not just our whole body, it's outside of our body. And so let's talk about consciousness again, and the concept of near-death experiences. Actually, recent death experience is actually a better word. We now have thousands of studies that looks where people have died and they have come back. And the doctors, scientists have analysed, and they've given the same descriptions of what happened after they were dead. The thing here is that these people's bodies and brains were dead. They should not be conscious, but they were. And they vividly remember what occurred when they were dead. And this is actually probably the first time I will talk about, I'm one of these people. I died when I was a very young child, and I'll never forget it. And I was in that light you see at the end of the tunnel, bathed in it, the most beautiful, brilliant light, the most wonderful feeling. I just can't tell you how beautiful it was, how peaceful it was. But I felt the sadness of my parents. And so I fought to get back into my body, which I did. And I remember getting back into my body and feeling the pain of the asthma attack that killed me, fighting, opening my eyes, seeing the doctor and my father, seeing my mother look over me with the tears down her eyes. And I said, I've been dead, haven't I? I said, yes, you died. And the reason why I want to say this is I know from my own experience, and there's thousands of us, that consciousness is not just our body, it's something bigger. And that's a very important issue. And what I want to say now is that we're getting good science showing this. And that's why I wanted to show that where materialism does not explain consciousness. So let's look at consciousness again and some of the work on plants. And this idea that plants are just these sort of living entities that aren't conscious is being pulled apart. This is only published last year, 1 year old work. Plants, by the way, have neurotransmitters. They're the chemicals that we use in our nerves to transmit nerve signals. Instead of having dedicated nerves, plants use their vein system to transport them. It's actually more efficient. They don't need a separate system. And here you'll see where a plant has been wounded, and you can start seeing the signals traveling down the plant. And what you're seeing, see all the networks of energy? That is a classic neural network. And you have a look here. The plant doesn't need a brain. The whole of its body is a neural network. The whole entity is conscious. We've got to get away from this idea that consciousness is just our brains. It's more than that. I think also, when you start looking at plants, and this is becoming really important in the way we work as farmers, because as farmers, whatever we do, it involves plants. And we know now that plants communicate. Plants are connected, and in the soil, they're particularly connected by fungi. And they make these incredible networks. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, biodynamic and organic agriculture should be soil-based, not hydroponic. We're talking about complex living ecosystems and plants working with fungi. In fact, this is what the recent science shows about plant communication. They can hear. You know, plants actually have more vision receptors than animals. So of course they can see. You know, if you're going to photosynthesize, what are you doing? You're recepting light. Plants have more light receptors. We know that actually they can smell. Plants have more genes for smelling than animals. We know plants can make decisions. We know plants have memory and can learn. They have social lives. They nurture their young, look after their old, you know. And plants feel stress and pain. These are conscious, sentient beings. Really importantly is the way we're learning how they network and talk with each other and the conversations. In fact, a word being used now for forests and this intercommunication of plants and fungi is the Wood Wide Web, WWW. And the other one now, we're starting to actually look at these ecosystems not as just an ecosystem, but as a superorganism, intelligent, communicating organism. We're looking at intelligence in these systems. You know, and I think we need to get this across. It's not just chemicals in the soil. We're talking about communication. That's consciousness and intelligence. And when you join it together, we're starting looking at these superorganisms, these super intelligent systems. That's what forests are. That's what our farms are if we do them properly. So, let's take it to the next level, because the thing is, when we read Steiner, we read a lot about energy and how planets, moon, the sun, the energy, the cosmic energy affects us. And it's interesting now what we're learning about that. You know, for instance, I just want to show you the picture of the solar wind, and when it hits the Earth, most of the times you can't see it, but when it hits at certain times near the Earth's magnetic poles, we can see the aurora borealis. But usually that energy is not detected. Yes, sunlight we can detect. These currents that we see are now known as Birkeland currents. They're two-way currents that go between the Earth and the sun, the Earth and the moon and the planets, and they all are connected. Look at the spiral. For me, as someone who loves stirring, here I see the vortex, the energy that Steiner perceived so well. Now it's documented. I think what, for me, I love is now, and this has really only come out in the last few years with technology that can actually detect these currents through space, that this energy pervades the whole cosmos, from us and our brains, other species, through to joining planets and suns and suns. Here we can see all the stars and suns that are joined by this current. So we actually know that they form along them where they meet. It's really interesting where they meet, you get these areas of chaos, and that's where new stars, new planets form. And when we're stirring, we get that area of chaos, that's actually where we know life entities form, you know. And I think to see this now at cosmic or galactic level is quite incredible. The same, you know, doesn't matter what level you do it at, the same forces apply. You can see them here, how our planets, moons, everything is connected. And what this is a cosmic neural network. The same way as our brain or any other neural network, we can now see it at every scale. And I want to show you here, this is, you know, this is only taken last year. This is how new this technology is, to see this cosmic energy that, you know, I suppose for me, as when I started as a biodynamic farmer, you know, when we talk about cosmic energy in the 1970s, we were ridiculed. Now, it's evidence-based. It's really important that it's there. And there, you're actually seeing galaxies form in this energy. And, you know, this is what Steiner could use his perception to see and understand and describe. You know, of course, he did a lot more than this, but I just wanted to bring this along. And I want to end with this, because this is a picture of what the universe really looks like. We normally see a picture of lots of little bright dots, which are either stars or galaxies. But now that they can detect the energy, that every galaxy is connected and has numerous connections with every other galaxy, and all the stars in those galaxies have numerous connections with each other, and they connect with all the planets and moons, and they connect with us at every level. What we see there is this incredible conscious neural network of energy. That's what the universe really looks like. Below it, I've just put a picture of what a human brain looks like as a neural network. We're the same and we're interconnected. And I suppose that's what I really want to end on here, is, for me, Steiner, you know, put across that we can learn to use our minds to develop a higher consciousness and connect and understand with the spiritual and unseen universe. And this, I think, to me, is just so important that the evidence is there. Yes, we can use our minds. It is there. We are connected with it. And we need to learn how to perceive it. And I think that's the other beauty about Steiner. He gave us tools on how to do this. They're not the only tools. There's many ways up the mountain, but those of us in this room know they're very good tools. And so, in the end, I want to also go back to what is important to me as a farmer, that those agriculture lectures were a way to use these tools, use our consciousness and our intent to improve our farming systems. And, you know, it's not just, yes, we use the preparations and how we use them. For me, it was very important is the idea of renewal, of regeneration, of bringing things to the next level. You know, Steiner was very clear on this, that, you know, the lectures are the beginning, and an incredibly important beginning. You think about it, it's almost 100 years ago, and we're losing millions of farmers every year around the world, but in our area, we're growing farmers. Look at the amount of people here today to show the resilience of his ideas. And I hope the one thing that I'll leave you with today is that I hope you walk away with, how do we take what Steiner started and do what Steiner wanted us to do and bring it forward to the next levels, to this century, the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.